Good morning, Year 4. How are you? And welcome to today's history lesson. Today you'll be learning who was in the Sutton Hoo burial, because we learnt a lot about the burial last week in history, and today we're going to continue that today and learn more about who it was. So by the end of this lesson, to be successful, you will be able to examine objects from the burial in detail and make inferences about them. What do they show? What does this tell about the person who was there? You will be able to use evidence to draw some conclusions about the person who really was in the Sutton Hoo burial, and you will also be able to realise the difficulty of being certain in history when using artefacts, so those things that they found. So to start with, you have some retrieval here. There are 3 questions all to do with our lesson last week. They are multi-choice questions, so can you write your answers down on your piece of paper, please? Pause the video now and have a go. Okay, number 1. What is Sutton Hoo? Is it a collection of grass, a collection of mounds, or a collection of objects? What do you think? It is B, a collection of mounds. We know that it was an area of ground and there was lots of little hills, apart from there was one extremely big mound, and that was the mound that they dug up. Well, why were the archaeologists interested in Sutton Hoo? Because of the lumps and bumps in the ground? Because there were scary things happening? Or because lots of crops were growing there? It was A, because of the lumps and bumps in the ground, because there were lots and lots of mounds, we know that, but there was one mound in particular they wanted to dig up, didn't they? So finally then, what did they discover at Sutton Hoo? Was it a box of food? Was it a body? Or was it a burial ship? That's right, it was C, a burial ship. Did they discover a body? No, they didn't. What did they find instead? That's right, they found lots and lots of objects. Now, last lesson, you were being detectives and you were looking at all those objects and thinking, what do they tell me about this type of person? Were they rich? Were they a man? Were they powerful? Were they important? Well, today we are going to find out who that person was. Are you excited to know? I'm excited for you to find out too. We do need to do some steps to find out who this person was. Today you're going to still be detectives because we need your help to find out who it was by looking at all the clues. Now, let's just remind ourselves of what we know about Sutton Hoo. So there were 12 mounds not far from the coast, so that's near all the water in Suffolk, East Anglia. So thinking of that place, East Anglia, that's an Anglo-Saxon place. And a few hundred years ago, some had been dug into and the valuables they contained had been stolen. So some of these mounds had been dug up and some valuables had been stolen. But then a woman named Edith Pretty moved into a house nearby. And she was really interested in this large mound because look how much bigger it is compared to these mounds. So she thought there must be something in there. So during the summers of the year 1939, so over 70 years ago, Edith Pretty wanted to get the mound dug up. So she asked some archaeologists to excavate, to dig up the mound. What did they find? They found a ship, a huge, huge ship. Now, did they find a body? They did not find a body, but because the mounds were close to the coast, the ship would have came from the coast. So the ship would have been buried there because it was near the coast, because we know that ships need water. Well, they are on water, aren't they? Some more pictures of the ship then, just to see how absolutely huge that ship was. It covered an enormous amount of space, which explains why the mound was so big. And we know from last lesson there was lots of different objects that were found inside the mound. But we're going to look at some of these objects in a bit more detail today because they're going to help us to figure out and really narrow down who actually was in the burial. So, I've got some finds here. The first find that we're going to look at that was found in or around the ship was a helmet. Now you might have thought last lesson that this helmet might remind you that he could be a warrior, he could be someone who fights, he could be in battles. So this person are they more likely to be a male or female? They are more likely to be a male. Now look at the material that this helmet is made out of. That might suggest to you that he's a warrior too. Maybe he could be rich. Let's look at another find. So another find was this. Do you remember what this was? That's right, it was a shield. Now this shield, when do people use shields? Would you go to the shop and take a shield with you now? No, you wouldn't, would you? So when would we use a shield? That's right, when they are going to fight or defend themselves. So with this shield, we can tell a few things about this person. We can tell that one, they are very rich because of the type of shield it is. It's made of some parts of gold here. Now back in the Anglo-Saxon era, this would have been very hard to get, this gold. And we might suggest that yes, he could be a king, but also we could suggest he might be a super king. Now, you might be thinking, what is a super king? Does anyone know? A super king is a king that's even better and even more powerful than a normal king. So a super king is an even more powerful king. He is like the highest form of king. And these items so far suggest that this person could be a super king, a warrior. We also have here a sword. These three items all together really solidify that thought process that you might be going through right now, that this person must be a warrior, a fighter, a super king, a male, maybe rich. And the final object on this slide is the scepter. Now, we did talk about this briefly last lesson. Does anyone remember what a scepter is? Well, a scepter is like an ornament, so something that someone of royalty would have. So either a king or a queen. You cannot have a scepter if you're just an ordinary person, not in the Anglo-Saxon day. You have to be a king or a queen to have a scepter. So considering that we think this is a male, this scepter could show that it belongs to a king. It belongs to this very noble, very royal person. So those are four of the things that we have found from the ship so far. And we did look at these last lesson, but another thing that they found were these coins. Now, do you remember why these coins were important? Shall we have a look? So these coins were important because they had the dates on, and there were 37 of them, all dated around the year 625 AD. And that's a really important piece of information. For everything that we've learned so far, the coins are the most important piece of information that we have, because the dates can tell us when this person was alive and when they were maybe around. Maybe it might tell us when they were working. And then one of the final things that we're going to look at today are two silver spoons. Now these spoons are really quite important. Now you might be thinking, Miss Newman, they're just spoons. I have some of those in my kitchen. But they are really important spoons because one spoon is inscribed with Paul, which is a name, and the other one is inscribed with Saul. And that means that they have these names written inside the spoon. So this is really, really important. And you might be thinking, what does that suggest? Well, these spoons suggest that this person is a Christian because they are christening spoons. But also, the owner at some time must have been torn between both a pagan, which is one religion, and a Christian, which is another religion. So we've learned so far about all the different objects, well, 6 of them in detail again, about what type of person this might be. And I am just going to take you to this video and I want to watch it with you to show you the rest of the objects. So listen carefully because it's going to explain them in more detail.
The excavation of the burial chamber began.
They were very, very carefully digging down with flat-bladed shovels so as not to cause too much damage as they went. But if you listen to some of the audio recordings on the little telephone things in the exhibition hall, you hear, I think it's W.F. Grimes, talking about just gold leaf just blowing around in the wind.
In just a few days, the professionals unearthed a whole series of rare and expensive objects. This had surely been the burial of a powerful king, sent into the afterlife with a rich array of provisions and equipment.
At the back end of the grave, they found the symbols of office, symbols of power and status, the standard, the sceptre, this giant shield. At the front end of the grave, the more domestic items, these stacks of silver dishes, these great yew wood buckets. The great cauldron over here would have hung from the wall of the chamber at one time with its suspension chain. Now, in the centre here, the more personal items. The helmet smashed into hundreds of pieces. The sword bent as if something heavy had landed on it. The belt, well, the belt had gone because it was made of leather, rotted away, but the great buckle, the archaeologists took it out of the ground, and it still worked. They could open it up, put a belt on it today, you could wear it, you could use it. It weighs about £1, but it's, so you know it was there. There's a little space in the back where there's a cover that slides across, where you could store maybe a relic, a bone of an ancestor or something like this. Still working after 1600 years in the ground. So the gold buckle then would have held the belt there, and then there was all these fittings, these golden garnet fittings coming down off the belt to hold the sword scabbard in place and so on. There was the purse lid. The purse itself presumably made of leather because again rotted away, but the golden garnet fittings off the lid still in place, and beneath them all these coins. 37 gold coins, all from different mints in France. Personal favourite from the grave are the shoulder clasps. I feel the most exquisite piece found definitely from this grave, if not from any archaeological site in the country. Now again, they still worked when they took them out of the ground. The shoulder clasps then, one on each shoulder, holding together two pieces of armour. On each pair, there is 1,000 tiny cut garnets. Shows the skill, the craftsmanship that these people were capable of in the early 7th century. They're not imported, they were made locally. The style of them is only found in East Anglia. They got the interlaced boar design on the top of the clasps there. The boar was a totemic symbol of protection to these people, to these Germanic people. You read in Beowulf of warriors going into battle with boar-crested helmets. The symbol like this would give them added protection in battle.
But who was it who once wore this helmet?
Okay, we are not going to find out just yet who it was who wore that helmet, but what we are going to do is use the clues that we have so far to work it out. So in part 2 of this video, I'm going to be talking through the clues that we have so far, and you're going to be detectives and help me decide who was there. Okay, so I'll see you in part 2.